So today, this is a demonstration of IBM MaaS360 mobile device management solution. This is the homepage of MaaS360. Immediately, you'll see where it says My Alert Center, and this will provide any administrator intelligence on what's happening with their mobile estate. It works with a traffic light system, so red is a violation, blue is for information, and green means everything's okay. All of these widgets can be customizable to what the administrator would like to report on. To the right is an activity feed. Again, this will provide intelligence to the administrator of what event has taken place in the platform. So if a new device was enrolled, you'll be able to see the device type, time and date. If an application was enrolled, a document was distributed, you can also filter on relevance. So some administrators find compliance their #1 priority, so they can actually just filter on compliance. To the left, we have a generic search where you can do a simple search for any device or any record inside the platform. So if I do a simple search for the word iPad, it will produce the list of all the iPads, all the applications and documents that have been distributed to those iPads as well. You have quick access links to the most common workflows, so it's easy to add a new device, add a new user, add an application, and add a document. At the top is an additional search bar, where this search bar will never leave you on whatever screen you navigate to. In regards to support, we have our Chat Now function, where you can chat to IBM support staff 24/7, 365. And by clicking the question mark, this will take you to our IBM Knowledge Center, where documentation can be found, same for user guides, enrollment guides, etc. I'll now step into our device inventory. This is our inventory view of where all of our devices will reside once they've been enrolled into the platform. So administrators can now gain clear intelligence over the device name, username, platform, model, operating system, and the most important factor is the managed status. Is this device enrolled? If it's green checked, it means you have control via MaaS360 over the handset. If it's red for whatever reason, then control has actually been removed. I'll click into this iPad as an example. This takes us into the device view, so we're not intrusive. We do not see any text messages, any emails, only the device information that's relevant to the administrators. So the first step is to take note of their username, and we can see that this device belongs to this user. We can now see the email address for the specific user, and the number will be populated if this was a mobile device, a mobile phone. Ownership. Who owns this handset? Is it owned by the employee? Is it owned by the company themselves? Workplace and security. This lets administrators know the security status of this handset. So is this device enrolled? Is this device in a compliant state? If it was out of compliance, then it would specify the reason in here. Which policies have been applied to this device? Does this device have a compliant passcode? And has this device ever been selectively wiped? With all of our device views, you can actually drill into a list of summaries to gain further intelligence. We have quite a vast list here. Just go into security compliance as an example. And this will give you a further standpoint on the security that has been enforced on this handset. So you can see which payloads we have configured, which profiles are installed on the handset, and which restrictions we have applied to the device. Together with our list of summaries, to the right we have a list of real-time actions. You can refresh the device information at any time, locate these devices, send messages to these devices. Now these are free messages, they pop up like notifications, and these messages can be pushed to individual devices as well as groups of devices. And there's no limitation on how many of these messages you would like to distribute to any of your handsets. You can click the buzz command. Now this is an alarm that goes off on the handsets, which allows administrators to help their end users locate their handsets. And by clicking more, administrators gain further control over the handsets. They can now initiate a lock command to send the device back to the lock screen. They can reset their device passcode for their end users. We have 2 wipe commands, a full wipe, which will restore that device back to factory settings. And we have a selective wipe, which will remove MaaS360 information from that handset. So if you've pushed out any applications, documents, Wi-Fi settings, email settings, all of that information will be removed, but wedding photos and text messages will stay present on the handset. So in a nutshell, you just remove the corporate data from the device. You can push an application, push a document, and to remove MaaS360 from that handset, simply just click Remove Control. Next step is to go into our security and policies. This takes us into our restriction workflow where you can apply different restrictions to devices. You can apply as many restrictions as you want to individual devices, groups of users, for example. We have different policy types. We have these briefcase-shaped policies. These are called our workplace persona policies, and these are for our secure container. And we also have different device policies, one for iOS, Android, and Windows handsets. First example I'll give you is what we can do from a containerized perspective. Click Edit. The first step is to choose which services our user will have for our secure container. So will we enable secure email, meaning email will now flow inside our secure mailbox and not to the native mailbox on the device. Secure browser, will they be using our MaaS360 browser where administrators can now provision URL and content filtering to that browser. Administrators can now define passcodes to access this container. The passcode complexity can be defined very easily. Specify the passcode age. You can also allow Touch ID, and if we integrate with end customers' Active Directories, we can allow users to authenticate with their Active Directory credentials. By clicking security on the left, this is how we can further secure the secure container. So you can now stop jailbroken and rooted devices from accessing a container, stop devices that have malware from accessing a container. You can also add specific application exemptions to this list. Administrators can now provision a time bomb. So if any of their end users haven't visited the secure container for a number of days, in this case 30, the secure container will be removed from the handset until your end user tells you otherwise. Some additional security features that can take place is restricting the exporting of documents and attachments outside of this container. You can disable the clipboard, so no cut, copy, or paste from any data which is held within inside the container cannot be copied and pasted outside of the container. And the screen capture function can be disabled as well. To the left is our email configuration. So this is the workflow how to configure email into the secure mail client. Administrators will choose their mail server, type in the active sync URL again. We can leave these user credentials blank. We'll take the information from the user record which belongs to the device, and end users will be prompted for their domain password, and they will have instant access to mail calendars and contacts. At the bottom, you can actually change the configurations to start the working week on a Monday, provide 1 month worth of email on these handsets at any time, and maybe provide 6 months worth of the calendar on these mobile devices at any time. From a security perspective around emails, attachments can be restricted from being forwarded, allow anyone within that end customer's domain to receive attachments, but external domains can be blacklisted. From a browser perspective, this is how we configure our secure browser for URL and content filtering. We have several different categories. So pretty much every single category there is. You can do a category search, very simple in this box. Social networking has now been defined, and you can now block all social networking websites from the secure browser, block and track all social networking websites, and you can also allow and track all social networking websites. And you can add as many of these categories as you want. You can also add exceptions to this list. So if Facebook and Twitter have been banned from a social networking perspective, you may want to whitelist LinkedIn.com. I'll just press back, and this will take us back to our policies. And I'll now go into an iOS policy. I'll show you the type of restrictions that we can apply to an iOS device itself. first step is to enforce a passcode on this handset. Again, administrators can define the complexity for these iOS devices in question. From a restriction perspective, you can stop users from installing the application, disable the use of the camera, screen capture function, disable Siri. Multiplayer gaming can be disabled. Administrators can now disable native applications such as YouTube, also Safari. Administrators can restrict their access from their devices being backed up to iCloud, and ratings of movies can also be disabled as well. From an application compliance perspective, we control applications via blacklisting and whitelisting. To blacklist an application, the workflow works as followed. You do a simple search for your application name in question. It's now been added to the list, and as many of these applications can be added, there's no limitation. You can now whitelist applications as well in the same workflow. This is stating all of the allowed applications on the handset, and any application that's not found to be in this whitelist will be deemed as a blacklisted and banned application. For customers who are not interested in going containerized, this is the workflow on how you push email down to the native iOS client on the handset. So the workflow is exactly the same. We need the ActiveSync server in here, and the same domain username and email address credentials can be left blank. Trusted threat management. This is the workflow on how to enable IBM's malware detection. It's a simple checkbox, and we'll now monitor and track compliance by detecting applications that have malware. From a Wi-Fi perspective, administrators can now configure Wi-Fi down to these handsets over the air. Simply just choose their configuration types, and they can add as many payloads as they want to this individual policy. There's absolutely no limitation. And it's exactly the same workflow for pushing down VPN connections and payloads down to handsets as well. We work with the majority of their VPN clients today. Next step, I'll show you how to distribute applications to these handsets. Workflow is extremely easy. You're simply going to go to the relevant stores. So if you're pushing out, if you have an iOS estate, you're simply going to go to the iOS App Store. You're going to do a simple search for your application name in here. We will search against the App Store and select your application. Policies and distributions. Administrators can now set some security on these applications, so they can define an MDM removal and a selective wipe. If a device is ever selectively wiped or removed from MaaS360, this application that we're distributing will also be removed as well. Administrators can now define who is to receive this application. Is this application now to go to an individual specific device? And they can do a simple search for the device name in this field. Is this application meant to go to a group of devices? Or should this application go to every single iOS device in the environment? Application bundles can now be distributed as well, where administrators can now distribute multiple applications at one stage. To distribute documents to the devices, you can now add a folder that contains numerous documents down to the device, or you can push an individual document down to the handset as well. You can browse and upload the document, or you can push the link or the URL where that document can be found. Again, administrators can now secure this document by restricting it from being exported, stop it from being cut, copied, or pasted, password protect this document, and also stop it from being deleted once it's been downloaded on the handset. Administrators, again, can actually choose the distribution. IBM MaaS360 can now set the time validity for that individual specific document. So they can make this document available from the hours of 3 p.m. and at 5 p.m. this document is no longer available on that handset. We'll now go into our MaaS360 compliance rules. Administrators can define as many compliance rules as they'd like, and they can define them to individual users, groups of users. We'll just step into one of these compliance rules to give an example of the type of restrictions that can take place. Administrators can now define which operating systems this compliance rule is applicable for, and they can also identify the administrators who are notified in the event that a device is out of compliance. If we click on the enforcement rules to the left, we have a vast number of different payloads that we can enforce against. Operating system versions as an example. You may want to specify an operating system range, allow or disallow specific operating system versions. So if we take the operating system range as an example, we can define iOS 10 to iOS 10.3.3. If any of our iOS devices in our environment are not found to be on that operating system version, immediately that handset will go out of compliance, and IBM MaaS360 will alert that user by email, will notify them on the device as well, and the administrators will also be notified in this event. And a customized message can be defined as well. After an additional hour, administrators may want to take some more stringent action. They may want to block their devices from accessing email. After an additional day, they can take some more restrictive action, like selectively wiping their device or changing that device to a more restrictive iOS policy that they created earlier. The workflow works exactly the same for every eventuality. The one I'd like to touch on is our jailbroken and router detection. So if we found, an administrator found that one of their employees had jailbroken a company iOS device, they may want to perform a selective wipe immediately just to remove the corporate data from the handset and maybe give a 72-hour grace period before they wipe that device back to factory out-of-the-box settings. Monitoring rules. If an end user removes the corporate SIM card, they can now gain intelligence. They can alert the user by email. They can notify them on the device, or the administrator could just be notified as well. The workflow is exactly the same for roaming changes or for operating system version changes as well. Expense monitoring rules. This is the ability where IBM MaaS360 allows administrators to now monitor and control the roaming data usage consumption and network data usage consumption on these handsets. You define your expense plans under expense plans here at the top or under managed plans. And you can define the following thresholds. If a user reaches 50% of their threshold, you will alert that user by email, notify them on the device. The administrator can be notified as well. You can now alert them at a 70% stage, and at 90%, there's also different actions you can take, maybe blocking that user from email, selectively wiping that handset, or changing that device to a more restrictive or lenient policy. But the main workflow is to literally gain intelligence to be ahead of the curve rather than taking a more reactive approach at the end of the month. The last step is to touch on our reporting capabilities. So there's numerous reports that you can report on from MaaS360, from how much data is being used from all of your handsets, from which applications are installed on all of your handsets. The most commonly used report by all of our customers happens to be our hardware inventory report. In the hardware inventory report, you can now gain intelligence over which manufacturers and models you're managing. If you're not happy with a pie chart, the view can be changed. Operating system versions. Administrators can now gain a clear view of which operating system versions their devices are now running. Free storage. This report is necessary if your administrators would like to gain intelligence on how much space is available on these handsets. Handy if in the event that administrator wants to distribute an application or a document, just to ensure that that device has enough space to receive it. With any of our reports, they're modular. You can click into any segment and it will produce a detailed report and identify the exact devices that fall into that specific category. So these two devices have been identified to both have less than 1 gigabyte worth of space. These reports can be exported into CSV at any time. You can change the duration of these reports, change it and define it by operating system. And you can also create subscriptions of these reports. Administrators can now define the subscription name, customize the report, name the recipients, and name the frequency. Last step is to show you how you can now define which administrators have access to this platform. You can add numerous administrators to the MaaS360 platform. There's no limitation. So you'd hover over Setup, click on Administrator, and you can also add your Add Administrator field in here. You can define their corporate credentials, their email address, and the username. You can also define which roles your administrators have. So we've given you some predefined roles that we have created, or you can actually just add and define your own roles. So guys, that concludes the demonstration of MaaS360. Hope you enjoyed it.